Hello everyone and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks Ben. Hello FiST Chat fans. Brought to you today by the brilliance of video telephony.
Exactly. But the question of which video telephony is the source of our debate today. But before we get into that, don't forget our website, www.fistchat.com. You can get all our links there. You can subscribe to our audio via iTunes, RSS and FeedBurner, and also get all of our videos on YouTube, Vimeo and Digicosm TV. So subscribe to all those channels. That's the best way to get through all of the stuff that we've produced. You can interact with us on Twitter, Google Plus, and Facebook. Love to hear from you. Make sure to check out our ebook, The FiST Report, at fistreport.com. It's only 99 cents, available on Amazon. All the links are there. Great read, and it'll help.
Great value.
Exactly, and it'll help support us too. And of course, we've got our supplementary content, the weekly blogs, photography on Instagram and Flickr, and of course, recommend us to anyone who may be interested in our weekly discussions. Now, I guess it's a good place to, it's a good time to talk about Skype, given our recent difficulties in actually recording our humble little production here using that service. Just going back, when we started FiST Chat over 2 years ago, Skype would have been the predominant sort of video calling format for the consumer. Thinking back then, the only other sort of platform would have been FaceTime, I think, and that was just in its infancy, because the iPhone 4 had come out only 6 months earlier, and that was the service that it debuted on. But the thing is, we'll get into this discussion later. FaceTime, of course, is Apple only. Skype is cross-platform. Now, there've been other services come out. We are, ironically, despite having done 2 years of FiST Chat on Skype, we're now recording this on Google Hangouts, and that's another service that's made its way into the scheme of things. But it's just strange that to point it out. Basically, we've had this problem in the last few weeks where on our Mac hardware, it's basically saying that the video won't turn on, and we've scoured the net for all sorts of possible troubleshooting and solutions, but there seems to be this information black hole as to what's actually happening. And
that's always suspicious, isn't it, Ben?
It's very suspicious. And, all you get is people on forums saying, why isn't Skype working? Now, we could go all conspiracy theory here, given that Microsoft bought Skype and is now integrating it into all its products, and suspiciously, maybe Skype only works on Windows. We don't want to have to think that, but what do you think, Steve? If we just focus on Skype for the time being, what do you think's going on here? It was really the one true cross-platform video telephony software. It was never really great, but it got the job done, and now it seems like it's not getting the job done, or at least for us anyway.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, it was great. When it first came out, it was great. And when it first went to video, that was fantastic. It doesn't seem to have advanced very much, really, comparatively to what the rest of, the tech world has done in the last 10 years, and that's a whole nother matter. Well, Ben, I'm a lover of conspiracy theories, but I'm also a firm believer that whenever it looks like there's one there, it's usually just a matter of some simple problem. I can't believe that Microsoft would be trying to actually lock people into the Windows software. I mean, that would be very Apple of them for starters. But I think it must just be a simple problem. Maybe something to do with the migration from Messenger across. What do you think?
Possibly, because Messenger was being shut down and Skype was going to be taking over all of that. So there might have been some inherent issues in that. And also,
there might be something.
I was also just going to say that Skype is actually a very different experience on the Mac compared to Windows. Never quite understood why. It's actually a very different experience right from the just the user interface, the way you set up the preferences, everything is quite different. If anything, the Windows version seems more customizable in that way. I'm not sure why, but maybe if Microsoft is trying to unify that experience, maybe obviously there might be some bumps along the way.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I was going to try and say. Was the experiences are so different between the two platforms, and it's hard to say. Maybe in terms of, I think they're trying to migrate Messenger actually to Skype. Accounts, and perhaps if you've got some Messenger hardware on your system, which I have, maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what this does sort of bring up though is, yes, Skype's really been the only cross-platform video service over the web, but why hasn't there been something, given the advances in technology, both hardware and software, why hasn't there been a bigger advance in this area? Because it's natural for people to want to use these services. For the most part, they're free. Apple's got a really good system with FaceTime, but the problem is you have to be using Apple hardware, and the fact that it's not cross-platform is a real problem. I think it's totally in line with what they with their ethos, of course. But can you imagine how good it might be for them if they actually opened up FaceTime to be cross-platform? They might actually get some people interested in their hardware and software.
Interesting you say that, because I was thinking about it. I mean, they did actually do that with QuickTime. I mean, QuickTime, I don't know if you remember, I was using QuickTime formats, and I think you were still in the PC world at that stage, Ben.
Yeah.
And at first, QuickTime formats just wouldn't run in the PC world. And now they're very popular, cross-platform. Yeah. You'd hope maybe Apple would do something like that with FaceTime now, somewhere down the track, because it's this whole fact that if video had been embedded in the internet or into the web when we first started, there'd probably be a universal platform for it. There isn't, which is why we run into these problems. And then secondly, though, currently, and I believe this is only a current phase, because I don't think the lockdown ecosystem is going to work, and this is just one instance where it won't. People don't want to pay to be locked into one type of software for a ubiquitous service. So phone calls, I mean, God, can you imagine only being able to make calls to other phones on your phone's network?
Yeah.
The phone companies have managed to get around that, and yet here we are with video calls, and you don't get the same freedom. That's why video calls will never take off.
Yeah. Although, I think there's also something to be said for the ease of use as well. Skype is... I wouldn't say was easy to use. If you're coming at it from a non-tech sort of background, like for example the cliched sort of relationship is like with your parents. You especially with me, I live in a different city to my mum, for example, and not that she knows her way around a computer, but it still took a bit of time for her to get used to how to use Skype, and because and it points to the question, why isn't it just, you open it, you press a button, and and the thing starts? And I don't think any of these services manage to do that. FaceTime is probably the closest, but again, it's not cross-platform. So, and it just makes me wonder why someone hasn't stepped in and delivered that.
I just think at the moment the business models don't allow it. I mean, I guess the closest thing we've got is peer-to-peer file sharing. So if we had something similar like that, in terms of, and Skype's actually very similar to that sort of peer-to-peer file sharing, which is why it is so effective.
Yeah, that's right. Now, I might just move into our Skype poll now that that we ran late last week, and basically, how would you rate Skype? Our responses: 11% brilliant, 22% good, 61% not that good, and 6% said woeful. I think that 61% not that good. I think that pretty much covers how a lot of people might feel about Skype. Actually, it's like something that you want to use, but it's not that good.
Yeah, I guess if you put it that way, you're right. I mean, it's something that we all use because there's really not anything better.
Exactly. All right, so we might move on to our news bites now, and we'll start with our film one, and this follows up from our one of our previous weeks about the Veronica Mars Kickstarter project. It's moved along a little bit. Hollywood Reporter is saying Rob Thomas formalizes Comic-Con plans. With less than 2 days to go before it ends, the Veronica Mars movie Kickstarter just passed 5 million, handsomely surpassing its $2 million goal. And as the updates come fast and furious, creator Rob Thomas has announced formal plans for programming at the San Diego Comic-Con. Moving along nicely from the sounds of it. It's interesting. I think we were just discussing the whole crowdsourcing thing before we got on. This guy's really leveraged that platform and the network quite well with this, hasn't he?
Oh yeah, look, this is a great story, and I love it. I love the fact that this film's getting up and it's happening. But it was a popular, albeit cult, television series. I mean, how can it not work? I guess if any one of us had a TV series, off the back of it, we'd probably be, all making films like this. But it's a great story. He's doing very well.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on to our science news bite. See-through brains clarify connections. It was quite an interesting one from nature.com. A chemical treatment that turns whole organs transparent offers a big boost to the field of connectomics, the push to map the brain's fiendishly complicated wiring. Scientists could use the technique to view large networks of neurons with unprecedented ease and accuracy. The technology also opens up new research avenues for old brains that were saved from patients and healthy donors. So this is, I guess, kind of another step forward in, mapping the brain, understanding the brain, that sort of thing.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of technology out there, and, I think as we sort of covered last week, it's one thing to actually look at the brain and work out how it all fits together. It's another thing to work out how we think and what that means as well.
Oh, if it can maybe lead to maybe some health, health advances, maybe that might be a good start.
Yeah, well, I think the health advances will come first because they're actually defects usually in the structure. So potentially, maybe that's where the advances will be. I don't know whether we'll actually understand the brain, but maybe when we do, we'll become something else.
Exactly. And finally, our tech news bite. Google searches for mental illness increases during the winter from popsci.com.au. A new study suggests that all mental major illnesses, including anxiety, eating disorders, schizophrenia, ADHD, etc., might get worse during the winter. And researchers analysed Google searches for the information about mental health in the US and Australia from 2006 to 2010 and found that in both countries, all mental illness queries were consistently higher in winter than in summer. Maybe the content of this story isn't necessarily the most interesting part of this. It's more the idea that Google could somehow coordinate and rationalize, behavioral searches, through their search engine. They could sort of, maybe they could, it's like a sort of way for them to keep their finger on the cultural pulse almost.
Yeah, probably, gives rise to the argument that there shouldn't be one search engine for everyone. I mean, collectively it means, well, we know that Google will alter our searches to give us what Google thinks we're interested in, such as advertising, but also search results. And it's just interesting then that if they're taking all the data of what they think everyone is thinking and reporting back on that, does it just mean this research that people who use Google tend to get more depressed in winter, or is there something wider in it?
So I guess we can't tell, but it does beg the question just how much information Google's storing in its databases and what it can analyze from it.
Well, that's it, and whether or not what they're telling us they're analysing is really of any importance. That's the other thing. I mean, we've known that people have a lot more disorders in winter, mental health-wise, for a long time. It's great that Google verifies that, but, I don't know that that's real research. That's just Google Analytics.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Steve, we're out of time, so thanks again for the chat.
Thanks, Ben. See you later, FiST Chat fans. See you again online on video.
Absolutely. So that's it for this week's episode, so we'll catch you next week.